All right. Our next speaker is here to talk about cultivating financial capability in large community initiatives. From the Campaign to End Poverty and Contra Costa, please welcome Mariana Moore.
So I thought that since the title of my talk is 22 syllables long, I better start with a cute picture, right? So that is me on the left, many years ago. You have to excuse the 1980s shoulder pads, you know how that was. And that is my daughter, Sharon. She was 2 years old. So I love that picture. It's one of my favorites for two reasons. One is that I was a college student, and I was going off that evening to my very first scholarship ceremony. And I had been terrified and not sure how to go to college, how to make it work, how to do it as a single parent. And so when I was standing by that door, I thought, okay, it's a baby step, like Stephanie talked about. And then the other reason I love that photo is that my daughter is standing there in pretty much the same pose that I have. Isn't that just adorable? And aside from being adorable, I felt a moment of pride and hope. It's like, I am trying to figure everything out. I am terrified half the time. I don't know what I'm doing. But my daughter is like standing there unconsciously mimicking her mom. And her mom is on a path. So that photo means a lot to me. The background to that photo is that 2 years earlier, at the age of 17, I unexpectedly became pregnant. These things happen. I had come from a middle-class background in a family where you don't get pregnant. So I just did not have any training or advice that people could give me in an odd sort of way on how to do this new thing of being a broke single parent. I moved out of my parents' house, was estranged for a while. My life just turned upside down in a matter of weeks and months, right? And so that smiling photo there hides a lot of terror and uncertainty and anguish and self-blame and a lot of stuff. I went down to the county welfare office because I had no other choice, and I started learning how to live on $400 a month. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and this was 1984, but even back then, you cannot live on $400 a month, right? I had to anyway, had no choice at that moment. So I want to talk today about not only my story, you're going to hear more of my family's story across several generations, but also the systems that surrounded my family and impacted our story, and sometimes helped the story move into a better place, and sometimes really got in the way. So, for example, when I was in college, living on $400 a month and trying to figure out a way just day by day to get into some more financial security down the road, there are some things that helped me. The biggest thing was that there's a community college that was a couple miles away that at that time was absolutely free. And so I was able to go, and when my daughter was 4 months old, I took one class. And then the next semester, I took two. I just took those little baby steps, and the college was very welcoming, very supportive. So that was great. And the other support, the other way the system helped me, was that they gave me that $400 a month. I will never complain about it because it was a lifesaver, right? Because that's not enough, but it beats the hell out of nothing. The ways that the system didn't help me so much, and that chain kind of gets broken, is that the systems that should have been there to support me were not coordinated. So I went through years of being on welfare. No one ever told me about WIC, and I could have gotten so much help with food from the Women, Infants, and Children's program, right? No one told me about food stamps. I would have also qualified for that. I don't know why they didn't tell me. They just didn't ask the questions. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what to ask. I didn't understand these systems. I had not grown up in a family that used these systems. I knew nothing. Another even worse, I think, linkage or break in the links is that there was so much stigma. And I say this to you as a white woman of privilege, and I'm going to talk more about that. But even for me, I remember going in the welfare office, talking with a caseworker. I had to bring my child in once a year, I think, to prove I hadn't killed her off at $400 a month. I mean, it's so many humiliating requirements. That was not in the manual. That was my own interpretation. And the caseworker said to me, what are your plans? And I said, well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to community college. I'm going to find a way to get scholarships. I'm going to go to a four-year college. I'm going to get my bachelor's. I'm not sure after that, but I'm really excited. And she looked at me, and she was a kind woman who I think meant well. And she literally said, Oh, honey, you can't do that. That's not realistic. You need to go down the street to the school where they train the hairstylists. So I have nothing against hairstylists at all. I pay someone a lot of money to do mine, and I couldn't do it, so not a knock on that. That wasn't my dream, and that was not my path to financial sustainability. And for someone to say that to me at the tender age of 17, that can't be your path, that's not okay. So, having told that story, and standing here today in a place of much greater financial security, right? So what factors did help pave that path? And there's two things I want to talk about. One is privilege. So as someone who grew up in a middle-class family that highly valued education, always assumed that all his kids would go to college, had parents in a stable marriage that loved us and told us they loved us, I never had to worry about, we weren't rich, but we didn't have to worry about is dinner going to be on the table. So, and you're a clueless kid, you don't understand the privilege ocean that you swim in. So it's like, of course, that's how everybody's life is. And I know now, of course, that is absolutely not true. And I learned that quickly when I fell off my own financial cliff. But because I had that privilege, I had the inner confidence, another word that Stephanie used, that I deserve to be treated well. I am smart. I want to build a life for myself. I need to move forward in a way that fully uses my gifts and talents. I'm terrified and don't know how to do it, but I know I deserve it. To be in that place and think that is a tremendous place of privilege. And I remember sitting in the welfare office and sitting next to women who are mostly brown and black and saying to them when they're saying, oh, my caseworker is screwing me over and she's said this and she's doing that. And I'd say, well, you have a right to look at the regulations, and of course you can appeal to her supervisor, the caseworker supervisor. And they look at me like, lady, no, that's not how the world works. You keep your mouth shut, and you do what you're told if authority says to do it, and they're just here to screw you over anyway. And that was when I woke up. And I said, the things that I've taken for granted, and even the struggles I'm in now that are and feel so hard, there are so many folks who have it so much worse, who don't have that inner voice saying, and have never had the external voice saying, you're worthy, we're here for you, you can do this. Can you imagine how that feels? Oh, and the other, what else paved the path was just the practical steps that I took. So again, even though I didn't have, I wish I could say I had a grand master plan to get out of the dark forest. I did not. But I just, because of my privileged upbringing and just whatever, it's like, okay, I know I need to go to college and I want to, and I love to learn, so we're doing that. And then right after I got out of college, I had met this wonderful man. I married him. He had a stable income. We combined those incomes. We bought a house. So that kind of practical stuff of how you get yourself out of that forest, right? And so I did those things, and I built a career, and I made good choices around the career for the most part. So that's like the practical piece, which is what we talk about more, about how you get to financial security. But the piece about what were the baked-in narratives in my head and in society's head, that's the stuff that I don't think we talk about enough. So what I'm doing now, well, I want to say first that all through my career, and I've worked in the nonprofit sector for 30 years now, I never forgot the women that I sat next to in that welfare office. I never forgot the absolute terror I felt about how I was going to pay the child care bill or how I was going to eat. And I never forgot the inequities that I saw and the ways that the system, even a well-intentioned system sometimes, not always, is just so broken in so many ways. And I had to just claw my way through, and so many people don't make it out. And I always thought, how can that be? And what can I do in my own small way to make that better? So a couple of years ago, there was this campaign forming in the county I live in and work in the Bay Area, Contra Costa County, and a whole bunch of folks from all these different sectors of business and labor and faith-based, et cetera, sort of put together a collective impact initiative, the Ensuring Opportunity Campaign, to end poverty. It's an ambitious goal. We're dead serious about it. And it may take 20 minutes. It might take 2,000 years, but we're on it, right? And we have a plan. And I was given the opportunity to lead that campaign. And it just felt like a coming home for me, that all the personal experiences that I've had, all the inequities and the awareness that I've built around systemic barriers, and all the relationships and connections that I've built over my career to bring others into this big tent to help move the work forward, this is what I'm being called to do. Oh, and before I move on, I want to say that we work in several policy areas. Oh, 2 minutes, wow. So we work in housing, food, et cetera, et cetera. And it was interesting as the campaigns evolved over 2 years. We realized that we couldn't just talk about housing policy and how to get more people enrolled in SNAP benefits. Like, that's important, that's the meat of the work. But it's really important to think about the historical legacy of slavery, racism, union busting, how Mexicans and other immigrants have been treated and are treated today, right now, in this country. The Chinese Exclusion Act. All these things have shaped our systems. We are all complicit in some ways, whether consciously or not, in shaping and maintaining those systems that even exist today, although sometimes in subtler form. So this is the transformation chart and the concept that I want to introduce to you. And so you'll see at the bottom is policies and systems. That's the policy work I do every day. That's how most policy campaigns kind of frame themselves. They start and stop the story there. But we also have to look at the institutions that put in place and implement those policies. Institutions that many of us are part of or partake in, right? And then we have to look at the individuals that are, working in those institutions, participants or beneficiaries of the institutions. And then last of all, we have to look at the values and culture that are baked into all the assumptions and narratives that each one of you walked into this room with. Somebody asked me one time early in my college life, like, why are people homeless? And that question, the answer I had then was really uninformed. And the answer I have now is like, now I know how much I don't know about how to answer that, but I know there's so many layers to that question, right? So all these things interconnect. This is a fuzzy slide, and it says, but I don't want to change. You know this, change is hard. So here's the thing, for true transformation, you've got to look within yourself and understand your own narratives, and you've got to look at the systems around you and poke at them and ask questions about what are the narratives shaping those policies. This is my daughter now. And I wish I could say she's a happy, doing well. So and I'm going to truncate this because I'm running out of time, but I want to say that she has struggled as an adult. So the next generation of our family she is homeless. She's currently incarcerated. She's been self-medicating for 15 years with meth and heroin. So our family has struggled. So I wish I could say I'm the success story, but I share that because it's not like, oh, it's all great now, it's fine. No. Family trauma persists. People make bad choices. Systems screw people over. So she's a wonderful person who's made terrible choices and systems have failed her. This is her daughter, Ellie. She came to live with us, my husband and me, a year ago last month. She was born to a drug-addicted mom, underweight, very unnaturally quiet, very passive, traumatized, not healthy. That's Ellie today. So we're now raising her full-time, her and her sister, and we're trying to think about how do we do the best we can for those kids, but also how do we change the systems that are still not serving our kids and our kids' kids, right? So this is a really personal thing for me. So my call to action for you is we need to work, all of us, each of us have to work at all these levels. Do your own work around your own narratives. Push and poke at whatever part of the system you're in. See that there's a whole elephant. Whatever leg you're holding, what's the other leg, and how do you connect with it? And so this is a question I'll leave you with. How do we cultivate responsive and connected ecosystems? It is an ecosystem, and we all have our part to play within it. And I hope that you'll understand those connections within yourself, with others, and with the folks that you are serving. Thank you so much.